Good afternoon out there, shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers. Today we're working on a 2003 Ford Expedition that would not crank over, would not start, but if you crawled under it and jumped across the starter relay with the ignition key on, it would start and run and seem to have no other issues. This is the starter relay. And I pulled it out to see if maybe this one would work over there. Swapatronics. It did not work. I checked all the fuses. I couldn't find a blown fuse anywhere. So I took the relay out and checked to see if I had power up here. I did have 12 volt power, and if I jumped from there to there, it would crank over if the key was on, and it would start. It would crank over whether the key was on or not, but it would start if the key was on. And so I would crank the key and see if I was getting 12 volts here. I was not. So I thought, well, I must have an ignition switch problem. So I pulled the little cover off of it, and it's a dark green wire. I had power on all of these wires except for one. When you turn the key on, all of these had power on them, except for this dark green wire. I think it's got a blue tracer on it. That is your ignition wire. I'm really not sure why they put, I think that's about a 10 gauge wire. Why they use such a heavy wire on there, if all that operates is your ignition, the start relay. But they use a big heavy wire. Well, when I turn it to the start position, I was not getting power there. No getting power. So I applied power there with the relay installed, made sure my transmission was in park, and I applied power here, and it would not crank over. So I said, well, I've got a problem between here and there. But with the ignition switch mounted, and I apply power, or scratch that, turn the key to the start position, I would not get power here. No power in the crank position on that green wire. And if I put power on it, I did not get power here on the coil side of the relay. So I've got a problem in this circuit from here to there. And I have a problem, the reason why I'm not getting power when I would apply, when I would engage the ignition switch. Now check this out. If I dismounted the switch, I can't do it one-handed, but if I dismounted the switch, held it with both hands and pressed this pin all the way over. Dadgum electric seat. If I pushed that pin all the way to the slide, the relay in, it would crank over. So maybe the ignition switch is bad. Well, I'm thinking, but two things wrong with it. Well, I was looking under here, and this pin in the ignition switch goes up there in that, you see that hole right above my finger? It goes into that. When you turn the ignition, the key rack moves, and this goes up and down. Well, this would have to go almost all the way down, the full measure of this oval, this cutout oval. It would have to go all the way down for it to put this actually into crank mode. Well, maybe it's adjustable. No, it's not adjustable. Those holes aren't oval. They're round. This sets in a certain spot. Like, I'm looking, and when I would put this in the crank position, this slide was stopping about right there. It wasn't going all the way down. So I took the lock cylinder out, and dadgummit, well, let's see, hang on a minute. Okay, you can see, let's get me a pointer. You see how this, get it in focus there. Well, get the crap off my pointer. This piece right here was coming around, and there was some plastic that was jammed up in here, and it was getting caught between here and this little shoulder right there. So the lock cylinder would only turn to that point. But when I cleaned that plastic out of there, dug it out of there, that would, see how it turns past there? It would only turn to there. But when I took it out, it would turn all the way. So I said, I think I might be on to something. Well, I looked inside the steering column. I did not see anything inside the socket that receives this that would have been jammed up in there. I don't know what it was. But I put this back in, mounted the ignition switch, and turned it, and sure enough, it cranked over. But here's the point of my video. Most generally, when you work on something, you have a complaint. It won't start, or it runs terrible, or whatever. Generally, you only have one problem. But this truck has got 3 different problems with this truck. The reason why it wouldn't start. The one problem is it was this. It wouldn't crank over because this wasn't turning the ignition, the rack in the column, far enough to engage the ignition switch to the crank position. And the park neutral switch is defective because it is between that green wire and the ignition switch and the start relay. It gets its power to the starter relay on the coil through the park neutral switch. It has to either be in park or in neutral. Well, I've got it disconnected, and those 2 terminal wires are jumpered across, so it will start and run because it thinks it's either in park or neutral. But it still would not start. And I'm like, what the hell's wrong with this thing? Well, the fuse box was junk. The relay has a constant ground here on this terminal, and it did not have a ground. I took the dadgum fuse box apart, and it smells like it's burnt. It smells like an electrical fire, but I couldn't find a problem. The boards there's 3 boards in there, I think, and they're soldered together with like about 60 pins on one side. I think it's on this side here where all these fuses are. And I could not find any tracking or burning or anything like that. Let me get out my other phone and see if I can get a picture. Well, there's a picture of it. That's the board took apart. And I couldn't find, right up here, you see there's the terminals right there. That's where the starter relay would set on. I couldn't find anything that would indicate that there was a problem, and I looked. I had my ohm meter set up to test continuity between that terminal and any one of the terminals on the back side of the fuse box where all of the connectors go onto it, and I could not find one single terminal that had continuity to that circuit on the relay. Now, for you guys that don't really know how relays work, they're all the same. Generally, you've just got 4 terminals, and some of them have it would be a normally closed to this this terminal here. You would have power on that terminal from here to here, and then if you would momentarily engage power up your relay, you would get power from terminal 30 to terminal 87, and it would kill the power to terminal 87A. I'm not sure what you would use that for, but they're all like that. Most relays don't even have that middle terminal on them, but generally the connectors will have it. And according to the schematic, this terminal here, terminal 85, shows straight to ground, so that it's not switched. Nothing else had to be on or off or engaged for this to have ground to it, and it did not have a ground. This terminal, terminal 86, will not have power to it, at least on this circuit, until you turn on the ignition and turn the key to the crank position, and then you would get 12 volts on here, and because of your ground, you're going to energize a coil that magnetizes the switch inside the relay and closes the circuit between terminal 30 and 87, and that would apply power. It goes from here down to your starter motor, to the solenoid on the starter motor. Well, it didn't have it. I went to the junkyard and got a fuse box, and I thought it might work. Well, there was circuits missing. It was out of a truck and not an Excursion. There were terminals here that was missing. This is where all the fuses go. Well, these on the nearest my pointer, those slide off of a post. See, like these terminals sticking up right there, that's a post that these would slide off of, that I could take off and put on the other fuse box. However, these inner terminals where the small fuses go, so you got that one and then you got that one, these are solid piece and they're soldered to the board. Well, they weren't even on that other. See these little round dots right there? They were like setting on there and soldered to them. All of these along through here. So I couldn't use that other fuse box. So what I wound up doing, scratch that thought. Here's a picture of the fuse box that I took apart that I wound up taking back because I couldn't use it. See that spade right there that's sticking up? It doesn't have the connector or the terminal that's pushed onto it to receive the fuse. And right there is where one of these would be soldered on. And right here, that one right there. And you see that spade does not have the terminal on it. The board is probably the exact same. The terminals on the back side of this fuse box were all identical to the one on this fuse box. But because these terminals were not installed, you know, I'm not an electrical technician, electronics technician, and that's what this would need to solder 1, 2, and I think there was 2 more in another location. But anyway, let me pull up this other picture. So that is the ground terminal for the relay in the original fuse box. I went in there and I soldered that wire to that terminal, and then I took the box and drilled a hole in the box and ran that wire through, well, dang it, ran that wire through the box, and then of course I cut all this lead off of it, and I secured, there it is, that wire coming out of the fuse box comes out right here and just circles around, and I put it in behind that bracket, so this is steel fastened to the body of the vehicle. So now I got a ground, a full-time ground on that circuit like I'm supposed to have. And when I apply start pressure, let's see, I can do it with my left hand. See, there it works, and it'll start. Well, it stalled there, but now it don't want to run. Now we're on to something else now. Anyway, but we had this problem here that turned out to be because this was not moving far enough, which turned out to be that the lock cylinder had something jammed in it. Removed that, put the lock cylinder back in. That gave me power on this circuit going through the neutral safety switch and up to here, and now the thing starts and runs. But now it's seeming like it's not, I think it's out of gas. But it's actually terminal 10 and 12. It's those two bottom terminals. Daggone it. Can't point at it with my fat finger. It's this last one on the bottom is terminal 12. Obviously that's 11, and that one there is 10. I don't remember which one is in and which one is out, but that's the in and out, and if it's in park or neutral, you will have continuity on those two terminals, and that would supply the circuit to here with the key in the crank position. And then obviously when the vehicle starts, you let off of the crank, you let off the key, then this circuit goes back to 0 volts like it should be. And you have no more voltage on this because you don't have power going down to the starter. You would only have power here on your supply to your relay. But sometimes, daggone it, I mean, I had a problem with the neutral safety switch, I had a problem with the fuse box that's burnt, and I had a problem with the ignition switch having something jammed, some plastic, I don't know what it was, but it was something jammed up inside there. And but I got all that cleaned out. I got all the problems fixed. Now I got to go get some gas to put in this thing. But anyway, you guys, thanks for watching. Share, like, and subscribe. And sometimes if a guy tells you got 3 things wrong with your vehicle, maybe you do. It's not common, but maybe you do.